Shavua Tov HaGutvach. One of the many amazing things we read in today's Torah reading is that Avraham, at the age of 99, was commanded to perform a Brit Milah, a circumcision, for him and for all generations in the future. On the 8th day, every Jewish child, every Jewish boy should have a bris. So I want to share a story that I heard this week of a rabbi. His name was Rabbi Berlin. He lived in Russia during the decades when the communist rule was so bitterly opposed to and making life impossible for a religious Jew. And this rabbi was a rabbi, and therefore he was a big target. And one day, two officers come to his house and say that tomorrow he has to appear in front of the judge, and he'll find out what he's accused of when he gets there. So he shows up at the courtroom, his turn is called, he's actually sent into a room alone with the judge. And he begins screaming at him and yelling at him and insulting him and calling him a parasite and God knows what. Then all of a sudden, while he's yelling, he motions to the rabbi to come close. The rabbi comes over to his desk and he whispers in his ear, "Tomorrow, a bris for my son," and he mentions the address. And then he goes on yelling at him and he says, "Come back in 4 days." And he issues instructions the rabbi has to return in 4 days. So the rabbi goes home, and he can't be sure whether it's a setup, whether it's a trap to catch him, trying to perform a bris and put him in jail for the rest of his life, but he decides to go ahead, and he shows up the next day at that address, and there's an 8-day-old little boy and a grandmother, an otherwise empty house. He performs the bris, and he goes back home. 2 or 3 days later, as he was told to, he shows up at the judge, and again he gets yelled at. And then the judge calls him over quietly and whispers to him that the baby's doing well, thank you very much. And then he yells at him and he dismisses the case. The rabbi later privately approached the judge. He knew where his house was. And he said to him, "I don't understand. If you're such an ardent communist and you're such an important person, a member of the party, why did you risk your life and your job, your position, everything to give your child a bris?" And the man answered with a simplicity. He said, "What's with me is with me, and what I got to do, I got to do. But I need my child to have his covenant, to have his connection with God, so he'll one day be able to explore it. I had to give him that opportunity." The bris is a sign, a covenant between us and Hashem, and it has an effect ever since it was commanded to Avraham. And I think you can connect it to this week's Parsha, where Hashem gave many blessings to Avraham, how his children will be like the grains of sand, and also as the stars of the sky. What's the blessing inherent in being the stars of the sky? It's better than the earth, the dust of the earth, and the grains of sand, I think. But what does there really lie in these words, like a star? We've all heard "twinkle, twinkle, little star," and we have the impression that stars are tiny and stars are little pinpricks of light somewhere far off in the distance. But the truth is that stars are humongous and stars are incredibly bright, and one has to get a little closer to appreciate the brightness. And that seems to be hidden in the blessing that Hashem said to Avraham, "Your children, your descendants, will be like stars," meaning to say they'll be bright and luminous and a source of tremendous brightness and clarity. May Hashem help that we can see in each other that we're stars and we're bright and we're sources of light, and appreciate each other and be there for each other. Have a great week.